matter and mind are two very different things. Socrates wrote 2,500 years ago that human beings are made up of matter and mind. Matter deteriorates, it collapses, it dies. But thoughts are very different. Consciousness is different. The soul is different. These things are made up of different dimensions. They don't have a weight. They don't deteriorate. They don't have an expiration date. So interestingly enough, even if you follow life's origin from the evolutionary measure, we go from perishable mind to imperishable mind. And if you follow...
Well, Brock, I finally have some time today, so I'm taking a look at one of your videos, the more recent one, Matter into Mind, where you make this claim that the mind is made of something imperishable, obviously eternal. You're trying to allude to a soul here. Really, Brock, is there any evidence for that? Well, I can say with perfect certainty that there isn't. There is no evidence supporting the claim that the mind is somehow eternal and can live on without the body. However, there is considerable evidence that the mind is directly affected by the neurophysiology of the brain and the neurochemistry of the brain. That the mind is itself an emergent property of the brain, just like a snowflake and the wonderful crystal pattern that it represents is an emergent property of the chemical and physical properties of water, or that a quartz crystal and its ordered lattice is again an emergent property of the chemical and physical properties of the chemical elements that make it up, or that a tornado with its nice cyclic form is an emergent pattern of the physical forces involved in its production. In other words, the flow of heat. All these things, Brock, including the mind, are emergent properties of the system. And throughout, well, psychology, especially physical psychology or neuropsychology, we found that what happens to the brain changes how the mind is expressed. A commonly used example would be that of Phineas Gage, where he worked on a railroad back in the 1800s, and while he was packing explosives into a hole for blasting, they went off prematurely and drove a railroad spike through his head, destroying one of his eyes, the left one I think, and destroying most of his frontal cortex and frontal lobes. Now, both what his family and friends said about him before the accident and then what they said about him after the accident show that he had a serious change in his personality. He became a different person. And we can see that today with people that don't suffer such a dramatic injury. People who become drug users, for example, their personalities change considerably. Or people who become alcoholics, their personalities change considerably. The effect on the brain, affecting the expression of the mind, causes these changes. There's also people that have, in the past, they don't do it so much nowadays, have had their two hemispheres of their brain divided, separated surgically. These are called split brain patients. And an interesting thing with them is that when you split the brain, Brock, you don't get one person with half a brain on each side doing fine. What you get is two distinct personalities, one being expressed in one hemisphere and one being expressed in the other. Oftentimes, these two personalities will even fight with themselves, with the right hand and the left hand doing battle, because they have a different opinion of what they should be doing. So, Brock, given the evidence of psychology and neurophysiology and neurochemistry, how can you say that the brain is anyway separate from the mind? Sorry, I said that backwards. How can you say that the mind is anything separate from the brain? You don't have the evidence to stand on here. Indeed, you're harking back to a philosophical view of Socrates of 2,500 years ago. He knew nothing of modern science, Brock. He didn't know what the brain did. He knew nothing of biology, in a sense. The truth is, middle school children know more about science than Socrates ever did. You know more about science than Socrates ever did. And we know your track record on scientific knowledge. Socrates was a great thinker in his time, but nowadays built on what he dealt with and on thousands of others, modern knowledge is quite a bit more complex and quite a bit more inclusive. We know a lot more. So Brock, the mind being separate from the matter of the brain? No. The mind is a direct consequence of it. And we have the evidence that supports that. Supports it quite well. Now, emergent systems, that's what the brain is the emergent property of a system. They exist throughout nature. We see them in things like snowflakes. Snowflakes are beautiful crystal lattices of water molecules. They are the emergent property of the physical properties of water. Quartz crystals are the same for the physical properties of silicon and oxygen when combined into silicon oxide. Tornadoes, a beautiful cyclic pattern, though destructive, are again the emergent property of heat and airflow. All of these things, Brock, derive their order from emergence. And our brain and our mind and their relationship is no different. So, instead of taking it to the bank, Brock, I say take it to the college, take it to the university, because you seriously need education on these topics you wish to discuss. Matter of fact, I can't even imagine how you could have made it through a university with this kind of scientific knowledge. I mean, I know as a communications major you didn't really have to study much science, but you still had to take basic science courses. But your knowledge on science is subpar for even basic science courses. Oh well. Now, the next video is again to you, Brock, but it won't be as, well, dealing with a claim made by D'Souza that you've parroted. It'll be dealing specifically with your actions as an individual, as they are.